Hello everyone, Nordic Beast here. Today we're going to cover 5 tanks that I would like to see in War Thunder. First on our list is the XM800T. The US military had wanted to replace its M113s and its rather flawed M114s, so development started on the MIC-V65 project to replace the M113s, and the XM800 series to replace the M114 Scouts. There were 2 models submitted, the XM800T and the 800W. The W model being wheeled and the T model being tracked. Today, we're focusing on the T or tracked model. Looking much like a smaller version of the later Bradley, of which it influenced its development, the XM800T was a small, fast, and agile scout, powered by the same engine as the Sheridan tank, and was derated to 285 horsepower to improve reliability. Had a maximum speed of 55 miles per hour, and was amphibious with a water speed of 4.2 miles per hour. It was armed with a 20mm M139 Hispano Souza cannon with a 1,000-round cyclical rate, and a muzzle velocity of 1,050 meters per second, or 3,400 feet per second. The cannon could fire high explosive incendiary, armor-piercing high explosive incendiary, and finally, armor-piercing hard core with a tungsten core. Best I can find on penetration values is around 53 millimeters. Other weapons included a roof-mounted M60 for the commander. The armor was an aluminum alloy with dual hardness steel and aluminum applique, enough to stop small arms and heavy machine gun fire from the front. Much like a slower but more heavily armored R3, but for the United States. I think it would be great at 6.3 in the standard tech tree for the US. As I use the R3 there, I feel it works perfectly fine. I've also found pictures of an XM800T armed with dual tow missile launchers. I can't seem to find any information on it, so if any of you have any information, please let me know in the comments down below. Next up, I'd like to see the German Weasel, which I'm pretty sure is a very popular request amongst players. There are 2 versions I would like to see in the game to start with, the Weasel 1 Mark 20 and the Weasel 1 ATM Tow. Both are small and highly mobile tankettes with a maximum speed of 45 miles an hour and lightly armed against small arms only. The Weasel 1 Mark 20 is armed with a Rheinmetall Mark 20 RH202, firing the same ammunition as used by the M139 mounted on the previously mentioned XM800T, with a similar cyclical rate, but a select fire firing between 880 rounds per minute to 1,030 rounds per minute, the latter being roughly the same as the M139 cannon. The Weasel ATM Tow uses the same hull, only armed with a tow missile launcher, with 5 missiles inside the vehicle, 1 stored externally, and 1 in the launcher for a total of 7 missiles. For the Weasel 1 Mark 20, I imagine it being much like the XM800T and R3 previously mentioned, in the regular German tree at 6.0. I would honestly have rather seen it than the Austwin 2. At least we know this one was actually built. The Weasel 1 ATM Tow I could see at 7.3 in the regular tree. Here we have the American M7 tank, originally designed as an up-armored version of the M3 M5 series. However, the US Army wanted a larger gun than the outdated 37mm cannon. Mounting a 75mm cannon meant a large turret, more armor. The added armor pushed its weight over what the United States Army considered a light tank into that of a medium tank. The M7 had improved mobility and speed over the M4, but its armor was worse and it had only the same firepower. Well, the M4 was already in production and the military wasn't looking for a new medium tank. Its armor wasn't bad by any means at 2.5 inches or 64mm. It was also well angled as its hull was similar to the M5. The M7 was armed with the 75mm M3 cannon of the Sherman, with 71 rounds as well as a coaxial mounted, roof mounted, and hull mounted Browning M1919 machine gun. I think this tank would be fantastic as a squadron vehicle at 3.3 to give a good example of what you can expect out of rank 2 and 3 tanks for the United States, and to boost an already fun and impressive lineup at 3.3. For these last 2 vehicles, I would like to point out that in War Thunder, China lacks a lot of unique vehicles, whether Chinese or Taiwanese. They're mostly bought from other countries or copies, And these two entries are rather unique and would fill out the rather anemic Chinese tree. First, we have a rather interesting and not well known entry. We have the Cadillac Gauge Jaguar, a Chinese American tank designed back in the 1980s. There's a very long history to this tank, but I'll have to sum it up. In the 1970s, President Nixon opened up relations with China. The Chinese needed a new modern tank to replace their rather outdated Type 59s, which they themselves were copies of Soviet T-55s. The development of the Jaguar started with the Type 59 hull, using its armor with a layer of spaced armor for added protection to heat rounds. Its turret seemed to be the turret from the Cadillac Gauge Stingray light tank, armed with a 105mm L7 cannon, able to use standard NATO ammunition at the time. Its weapons also included a coaxial 30 caliber machine gun and a roof-mounted 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun, and 8 smoke grenades on the turret cheeks. Its engine was replaced by a 750 horsepower Detroit diesel, giving it a horsepower to weight ratio of 18 horsepower per ton, far better than the T-55 series. Though not quite as good as other tanks coming out at the time, it was far lighter and far cheaper, which is what the Chinese were interested in. In War Thunder, I could see this making a great addition at 8.7 or 9.0 in the regular tree, or as a premium, much like a Chinese XM1, only slower. Last, we have the Type 64, an interesting hybrid of parts from American vehicles cobbled together to make something between an M18 Hellcat and an M41 Walker Bulldog. The Type 64 was a mix of an M18 turret mounted on an M42 anti-aircraft vehicle hull, which itself was based off the M41. There isn't much information on this vehicle, so I'm not sure if it mounted the same gun as the M18 or the gun from the M41 or what kind of ammo it fired. Interestingly enough, it did mount a coaxial 30 caliber machine gun, unlike the M18, but kept its 50 caliber M2 for anti-aircraft work. Depending on what kind of ammunition the Type 64 carried, I'd like to see it at 5.7 or 6.0, much like its American counterparts. And there you have it, my list of 5 vehicles I would like to see in War Thunder. Did you like the list? Are there anything that you would like to see in game? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.